Mosaic, a daily news program from Link TV, presents a selection of news reports from independent and state-controlled broadcasters from throughout the Middle East.
Upon his sudden arrival to the Iraqi capital of Baghdad, the British Defense Minister Jack Straw said that he is confident that violence will decrease when the authority will be transferred to the Iraqis.
The security situation remains difficult, and I was talking about that to General Figures and to General Sanchez this morning, but I am very clear that a combination of the political process and military effort will ensure that there is a transition on schedule by the end of June, and unquestionably that Iraq not only is a better place, will become a far better place as a result of that transition and the work of the coalition and our partners internationally, but above all through the work of the Iraqi people.
The New York police said that an unknown smell sending 5 underground workers to the hospital is not linked to terrorism. The fire department in New York said that the firefighters and emergency personnel are inspecting the F-line, which links the Chelsea area in Manhattan to Chinatown, trying to figure out the reason behind the mysterious smell in the tunnel. The Turkish Prime Minister Erdogan accused Britain of not sharing intelligence information with Turkey, predicting the possibility of terrorist attacks in Ankara and Istanbul. Erdogan added that the source of information is legitimate and that the information must be handed to the concerned countries, not to the media, to help the war on terrorism. Hours after the British government announced terrorist warnings, the Turkish government put the police on an alert status. Turkish police inspected vehicles and trucks on the roads that go to Istanbul. Israel accepts Washington's decision to reduce the U.S.'s loan guarantees due to a disagreement between the two sides concerning the controversial separating wall and the expansion of settlements in the occupied territories. Meanwhile, Palestinian officials criticize this decision, saying it is not enough to make Israel stop building the wall and erecting settlements. They reduced the loan guarantees by about $300 million, which are part of a U.S. loan guarantee deal in the amount of $9 billion. The reduction amount was allocated to building the separating wall between Israel and the West Bank. Israel undermined Washington's decision to reduce some of its loan guarantees to them. Israeli officials avoided criticizing the American administration.
It is an old agreement that was signed.
It is an old agreement. It was signed in 1992 between George Bush, the father, and Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin, and it was adopted by this government. We accepted the conditions for the long-term loan guarantees, which clearly state that any construction behind the Green Line will be dealt with differently, and we accepted the conditions.
Israelis' continued settlement activity and the ongoing construction of the separating wall are the 2 points of disagreement with the American administration, expressing their dissatisfaction with Prime Minister Sharon's policies in the Palestinian territories. They reduced the loan guarantees to Israel by $300 million. Palestinian officials, however, feel that this is not sufficient.
As far as the Americans
As far as the American decision, I think it is a message to force Israel to stop erecting settlements and stop their war, but they will not succeed. I really urge President Bush to exert more pressure on Israel to completely stop settlement activities as stated in the roadmap. That is, if we want to give peace a chance.
The loan guarantee is in the amount of $9 billion, but they are reducing the amount dedicated by Israel to build the part of the separating wall that will divide the West Bank under the pretext of Israeli security. However, nothing will stop them from building this wall. Today, a U.S. military spokesman in Tikrit confirmed reports that the U.S. forces arrested the daughter and one of the wives of the vice chairman of the former Revolutionary Command Council in Iraq, Izzat Ibrahim al-Durri. They were arrested in the city of Samarra, north of Baghdad. Commander of the U.S. 4th Infantry Division in Iraq, Raymond Aderno, stated that the U.S. forces are looking for al-Durri and are seeking more information on the possibility of him funding the attacks against the coalition forces. The U.S. command has recently put al-Durri's name on the top of the most wanted list to follow Saddam Hussein's name. They also posted a $10 million reward for information leading to his arrest. Head of the Supreme Islamic Revolutionary Council in Iraq, Abdulaziz al-Hakim, demanded that the interim governing council revise a number of articles of last month's agreement between the council and the coalition. During a press conference in Najaf, al-Hakim warned of serious problems if the council did not take into consideration reservations made by the Shiites, adding that he met with the two prominent Shiite religious figures, Ayatollah al-Umm al-Sistani and Muhammad Saeed al-Hakim, saying that they both share his views.
The occupation forces bear a responsibility. According to the United Nations Security Council resolution, they are responsible for transferring the authority to the Iraqi people. Therefore, they must find the best way to do so. As for your second question about reactions, only the future will tell. However, I believe there will be a real crisis in the country if they don't agree to this plan.
On the Eid Al Fitr holiday, Muslim Supreme Leader Sayyid Ali Khamenei said in Iran that the American people should know that their government has led them into a quagmire in Iraq. Sayyid Khamenei said if the US-led coalition lets Iraqis vote freely, a large majority would choose people who would not tolerate one more day of US presence. He added the Bush administration would not succeed in transforming Muslim people into servants. The Imam also hailed the Palestinian people who are steadfastly resisting the Israeli occupation policies.
Muslim Supreme Leader Sayyid Ali Khamenei said that the United States and the Zionist movement have reached a dead end doomed to failure in occupied Palestine, and they have no other choice but retreating. In a speech he made before massive crowds who came to celebrate Fitr Day in the Great Mosque in Tehran, Sayyid Khamenei said, with the blessings of Islam, the Palestinian people are confronting the Israeli military machine and will remain steadfast in facing the Israeli policies. His Eminence further condemned the US administration's support to the Israeli crimes. As for Iraq, Sayyid Khamenei said that the United States entered Iraq under the name of spreading democracy and supporting human rights and fighting the promulgation of weapons of mass destruction. But today, it is tightening the snooze on the Iraqis, who are hitting back forcefully as they are not bearing the occupiers anymore and have started resisting them and will continue doing so. He said the United States has totally realized that it is in crisis, and no matter what it does and how many billions of dollars it spends, Washington will not be able to suppress the peoples of the region and their freedom. The Imam also said the alleged US democracy is a big lie rejected by all peoples. He said that were the Iraqis given the right to self-determination via elections, they would have chosen not to keep the occupation for one day. Sayyid Khamenei vowed the Iranian people will face with utmost power the US hegemony that backs dictatorships that serve its interests and outs other regimes that object its policies.
The UN nuclear watchdog unanimously condemned on Wednesday Iran's nuclear program for what it said was 2 decades of covert activities, but did not send Tehran before the UN Security Council for possible sanctions. The resolution, adopted within minutes of gathering in Vienna, represented a compromise proposal between the United States and Europe's big three, Britain, France and Germany. Iran welcomed the resolution, saying it shows that the Islamic Republic is not seeking to possess nuclear weapons. Tehran also said it was ready to sign an accord on wider inspections of its nuclear sites by the UN Atomic Agency.
The United States had to pull back from its hard line on Iran's nuclear program to preserve its relations with European allies and avert a new crisis in the Middle East. Experts say that the administration of George W. Bush knows it cannot afford new international tension less than 1 year from a presidential election. The UN nuclear watchdog, the International Atomic Energy Agency, agreed on a compromise motion hammered out by the United States and key European allies, France, Britain and Germany, to condemn Iran's nuclear program through a resolution agreed upon in Vienna. But it will not call for Iran to be discussed at the UN Security Council for possible sanctions. The draft resolution balances a U.S. call to condemn Iran for almost 2 decades of nuclear activities with the 3 European countries' demand that Iran be rewarded for cooperating with the watchdog since October. The draft resolution includes a concern by the agency's Board of Governors as to Iran's alleged breach of its commitment to the Non-Proliferation Treaty. The head of the UN nuclear watchdog, Mohammad al-Baradei, reported that Tehran violated nuclear safeguards for the past 18 years, including making small amounts of plutonium and enriched uranium. But he later said that there was so far no evidence Iran was working on making nuclear weapons. The draft resolution points that the new information provided to al-Baradei contradicts with the previously presented Iranian guarantees to adopt transparency while presenting information on the nuclear program. In this context, the Board of Governors stressed in the resolution that the key for the return of the international trust is Iran's voluntary suspension of the process of enriching uranium. U.S. Secretary of State Colin Powell said his administration was very pleased with the resolution. He said the United States especially welcomed a part of the resolution which immediately refers what he called any future Iranian violation of international agreements to the IAEA board.
And there is one particular paragraph in the resolution which makes it very, very clear that if Iran does not now comply with its obligations and the other agreements that's entered into, then this will be a matter that will be immediately referred to the IAEA Board of Governors for action as appropriate under the various statutes. So that's, I think, an important element in the resolution, an element that we wanted to see in the resolution. Which points out that action will be forthcoming, appropriately so, if there is any indication in the future that Iran is not meeting its obligations.
Iran, for its part, slammed Israel's campaign to convince the world that it's intent on acquiring a nuclear weapon. Foreign Ministry spokesman Hamid Rida Asafi said, quote, "The falsification of the facts and negative propaganda about Iran's civilian nuclear activities are totally motivated by the hostility of the Zionist regime." Iran has made clear on Wednesday it will carry out its promise to sign the additional protocol of the NPT, allowing for surprise UN inspections of its nuclear sites, which it stresses only harbors a civilian nuclear energy program.
Eid Al Fitr is still being marked by Muslims around the globe with prayers for the end of oppression and occupation, noticeably in Palestine and Iraq. More in this report.
Some 3 million Palestinian Muslims under Israeli occupation flocked into mosques throughout the West Bank, Gaza and occupied Jerusalem Tuesday to attend early morning prayers to mark the beginning of the 3 days of Eid Al Fitr. But even this freedom of religion was violated by the Israeli troops. In Jerusalem, the Israeli forces erected even more outposts and prevented many Palestinians from reaching the Al-Aqsa Mosque to offer their prayers.
مدينة القدس طوال شهر رمضان
All through the month of Ramadan, the city of Jerusalem was more like a military camp for the Israeli occupation army. They prevented us from reaching the Al-Aqsa Mosque through erecting checkpoints around the city. Hundreds of thousands of Palestinians were barred by patrols to partake in the prayers, and in my viewpoint, preventing people from worshipping God in His holy shrines is the worst kind of terrorism ever.
To face with utmost unity, this and other forms of Israeli terrorism, preachers at mosques called on worshippers to express solidarity and help in every way possible the families of Palestinians wounded, martyred and displaced during the blessed Palestinian Intifada. Following morning prayers, Muslims again challenged Israeli checkpoints and dispersed to cemeteries throughout the region to pay tribute to those they love and who were killed during the Intifada. Supposed joy turned to grief, but the certitude that occupation will come to an end and liberation will prevail was more true than ever. I raised my son an orphan, this heartbroken mother says. He offered his blood for Palestine and for its freedom. The holiday was a most emotional moment for fathers and mothers of Intifada martyrs who were killed by Israeli troops this year, with this holiday being the first marked without them. Sighs shook the hearts in shows of great pride of victory to come, but tears betrayed the hearts and mingled with words. He left great emptiness, says this lamenting mother, but what are we to do? We will submit to God's will. Children sought to be happy playing this or that game, but the memories of relatives imprisoned and others separated by the Israeli separation wall abolished every show of jubilance. In Iraq, under U.S. occupation following long years of Saddam's oppression, the Fitr prayers were held in various holy mosques in and around Baghdad. In serene prayers, the worshippers raised their voices, calling for a blessed victory against the U.S. occupiers. The three-day holiday that marks the end of the holy fasting month of Ramadan was still being observed in the Muslim world. Millions of Muslims across India celebrated Eid Al Fitr. They gathered at the national capital New Delhi's Jama Mosque to offer Eid prayers and greet each other. Also in neighboring Bangladesh, millions of people celebrated the holiday. They offered mass prayers for their beleaguered brethren in Iraq, occupied Palestine and Kashmir, and sought divine blessings for peace in Bangladesh and across the Islamic world.
Yemeni security forces said it arrested one of the main leaders of the Al-Qaeda group, Muhammad Hamdi al-Ahdal, also known as Abu Asim al-Makki, who spent years on the run after masterminding attacks against Western interests. The statement said al-Ahdal, 32 years old, who is also on the U.S. list of so-called wanted terrorists in Yemen, was found after several months of extensive efforts by security forces. Yemeni security information said the Saudi-born al-Ahdal was a mastermind of the 2002 attack on a French oil tanker off Yemen's coast and the 2000 bombing of the USS Cole, which killed 17 U.S. sailors. Britain's third most senior judge intervened in a transatlantic row over the United States detention of suspects at the Guantanamo Bay in Cuba, describing their imprisonment as a, quote, monstrous failure of justice. In a speech made in London, Judge Johan Stein said all Guantanamo's detainees had been deprived of any rights whatsoever. He said the quality of justice envisaged for the prisoners there does not comply with the minimum international standards for the conduct of fair trials, as the procedural rules do not prohibit the use of force to coerce the prisoners to confess. His commands come amid frantic efforts by London to have 9 British detainees returned home to face trial rather than go before a US military court. Meanwhile, a package of US concessions for 2 Australians being held at Guantanamo Bay was described as inadequate by the man's families and lawyers. Under the deal, the US military has guaranteed it will not seek the death penalty for Australians David Hicks and Mamdouh Habib, and said it will consider allowing them to serve any jail sentences in Australia. The package, believed to be the first of its type negotiated with Washington over the fate of Guantanamo detainees, has been hailed as a possible blueprint for more than 40 other governments with citizens held at the base. The detainees' lawyers said the deal was distraction from the fact that their clients had been held for 2 years without charge.
Talk to their families, they'll be allowed to at least speak to him, but we have no idea when. I mean, is this in 3 years' time? It'll be of little value to David by that stage if he spent years in a cage.
For me, it's just window dressing, the window dressing of justice. It's a rhetoric designed to make people think that they are getting justice when really they're getting a raw deal.
A 9-year-old Palestinian boy died in the southern Gaza Strip Wednesday after being shot in the head by the Israeli army. Palestinian medical sources said that the boy from Rafah died shortly after arriving at the town's hospital. The latest death brings to 3,621 the number of people killed since the outbreak of the Palestinian uprising in September 2000, including 2,701 Palestinians and 854 Israelis. Iran hailed Wednesday a resolution by the UN's nuclear watchdog condemning it for 2 decades of covert nuclear activities, but deciding not to recommend that it go before the UN Security Council to face possible sanctions. Foreign Ministry spokesman Hamid Reza Asefi said the resolution was an achievement for the Islamic Republic and the proof of its transparency. The 35-nation board of directors of the International Atomic Energy Agency, IAEA, agreed on the compromise resolution after a tussle over the wording between the United States and European countries in Vienna earlier Wednesday.
As you have seen, the Board of Governors of the International Atomic Energy Agency today adopted by consensus a resolution on the implementation of safeguards in the Islamic Republic of Iran. I think the resolution sets out a marker in terms of non-proliferation. It deplores in strong terms Iran's undeclared activities. It makes it very clear that Iran should cooperate fully and in a very transparent way in the weeks and months to come. And it also makes it very clear that should any serious failures comes to light in the future, these will be taken by the board with the seriousness it deserves. I believe that today's decision is a good decision. It's a good day for peace. It's a good day for multilateralism. It's a good day for non-proliferation.
The guns fell silent over Kashmir's border Wednesday as the first ever full ceasefire between India and Pakistan came into effect, raising hopes that talks to find a lasting peace could begin. Officials on both sides said there had been no shelling or gunfire across the frontier of the rugged Himalayan territory since the ceasefire came into effect at midnight Tuesday. However, both New Delhi and Kashmir fighters warned there would be no ceasefire inside Indian Kashmir, where tens of thousands have died since 1989 in the struggle to end Indian rule. The agreement to halt fire came after Pakistani Prime Minister Zafarullah Jamali announced Sunday unilateral ceasefire in Kashmir, starting from the Eid holiday, marking the end of the holy fasting month of Ramadan. India agreed to reciprocate the move, which has been welcomed by the United States and other Western powers. Indian government sources quoted by the Indian media said the truce marks the first time India and Pakistan have agreed to a full ceasefire. In the past, both sides have agreed to lower the level of firing or exercise maximum restraint, but never to call a complete halt to the almost routine exchanges of fire.
United States Secretary of Defense Don Rumsfeld accused the Al Arabiya and Al Jazeera satellite televisions of cooperating with what he called terrorists who are launching attacks against coalition forces in Iraq.
Yes, I've seen scraps of information over a sustained period of time, but this information must be investigated in a consistent and responsible way. I'm not in a position to make a final judgment on it. The attackers called Al Jazeera and Al Arabiya to come and watch them attack American troops. They say, come and see us, watch us, here's what we're going to do. They must be a part of the information or psychological warfare that the attackers are using.
Meanwhile, the Journalists Without Borders organization demanded the reopening of the Al Arabiya office, which was closed by an order from the Iraqi Governing Council. The Paris-based organization demanded the Iraqi Governing Council to immediately reverse its decision to ban the Al Arabiya news channel from covering news in Iraq if the channel signs a written agreement that it will not encourage terrorism. Announcement signed by the General Manager of the Journalists Without Borders organization stated that the new Iraqi authority does not have the right to force a news channel to change its coverage by force.
Dear audience, the Al Arabiya has received a voice recording from the former Iraqi President Saddam Hussein. It included a speech to the Iraqi people on the occasion of the holy month of Ramadan. He called for resisting the American and British occupation of Iraq. Now, we leave you with this voice recording.
In the name of God, the merciful and compassionate. The collaborators they brought with them after coming in with their tanks and soldiers like stray dogs that walk along the side of caravan, who lack even the minimum political weight among the great and loyal Iraqi people. None of them can even walk in the streets of Baghdad or any other Iraqi city. They are dealing with their failures by visiting Arab countries, seeking what they call advice. We tell them that Iraq is part of the Arab nation and in time will play a leading role. Figuratively speaking, Iraq has a special chemical mix that can only be deciphered by the believers among the sons of Iraq.
Finally, Osama bin Laden and Saddam Hussein were on a ship crossing thousands of miles before disembarking at the port of Haifa in Israel. These two unwanted visitors did not complain at all for being kept in custody, dancing for a long time after learning that they are only accused of incitement.
Imagine 450 bin Ladens and 50 Saddams in this world. To be more imaginative, what if we told you that they all arrived to the port of Haifa in Israel? They are all singing and dancing after arriving from China. Yes, they were in China. These men are wanted by security agencies throughout the world who are looking for them on land or water, even though they were in China. Of course, bin Laden and Saddam are unwelcome visitors in the Hebrew state, even if they aren't there in the flesh. Israeli customs officials rushed to confiscate them according to a law against incitement. However, it is not illegal to obtain these types of dolls in Israel. But bin Laden and Saddam are not good examples to children. Nevertheless, these strict Israeli policies did not stop Saddam from dancing, or bin Laden from coming out of his cave.
Mosaic is made possible by a grant from the John S. and James L. Knight Foundation, which promotes journalism excellence worldwide and invests in the vitality of 26 U.S. communities. and the William and Flora Hewlett Foundation. Additional support is provided by the Firedoll Foundation and Henry and Virgilia Dakin,